Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Baltimore. In New York on Friday, the Left Forum will begin. It's been going on for many years, and it's an assembly of, this year, more than 1,000 speakers on various panels dealing with issues. But the overall theme is ecology, economy, transformation of economy, and transformation of ecology. Now joining us as a member of the board of Left Forum is Nancy Holmstrom. She's Professor Emerita of Philosophy at Rutgers University. She edited the Socialist Feminist Project and co-authored Capitalism, For and Against, a Feminist Debate. And she joins us from New York. Thanks for joining us, Nancy.
Thank you for having me.
So talk a little bit, first of all, about the main theme and why it's the main theme.
Well, it should be the main theme. This is really the first time that the Left Forum has focused on the ecological crisis. Not just have they not focused on it, but we have given, as a conference, pretty scant attention, I would say, to this issue. In all the years that I've been involved with Left Forum, and certainly social scholars before that, there have been only 2 plenary speakers in all these years who've had a mainly environmental focus into their work.
And why do you think that is?
Well, that's what actually I'm going to be addressing in my introductory remarks at the opening plenary on Friday night. I think that part of the reason is psychological. The news is so awful from the environmental field. With some years ago, the UN report, Ecosystems report, said that 2/3 of the resources of the world were either degraded or being destroyed. And just last month, the percentage of carbon dioxide in the air has gone up to 400, which has not been seen in millions of years. So it certainly should be something that we should be preoccupied with, but it's such awful news. It is so deeply disturbing, sad, and in fact terrifying. Like if you see that film, Chasing Ice, you see the glaciers melting, breaking away in real time.
But you've been dealing at the Left Forum with issues of war and economic crisis and unemployment. I mean, some of the issues that get dealt with are pretty bad. It's not like it's a good news it's not like a feel-good conference up until now.
Right. But anyway, I think this is about existence. I just said partly it's psychological. None of us really want to face it. But in addition, we on the left have, as you said, spent years and years studying and struggling about all these other very big, disturbing issues. And to take on the environmental issue seems, it would require a shift in our expertise, in our skills, our concerns, and we have, you might say, sunk our intellectual and political capital in these other areas, and there would have to be, it seems like, taking on something even larger. But I think there are also political reasons. I think that this is an issue which affects everybody, rich and poor. Need clean air, clean water, and I think the left feels that there is a danger of these more particular issues of injustice and suffering being somehow swamped and ignored in this huge humanistic cross-class issue. And think that that's a mistake because all those injustices, all those inequalities, all those miseries are only exacerbated by the environmental crisis.
But
even though the rich as well as the poor need to breathe, they also profit from its depredations. And meanwhile, they can buy biofuels for their SUVs while people go hungry. They can keep buying water, so they can insulate themselves. So it doesn't affect them as much. It mostly affects poor and working class people, and they're the ones who have mostly been organizing around the world against environmental depredations. Anyway, so that's a concern of the left, which I think is not should not be a concern, should not take us away from really facing and addressing environmental issues and connecting them to the economy, because it's the nature of our economy which is causing this environmental crisis.
You would think that from a point of view of a conference and people who are looking for transformation, particularly of capitalism, that's more or less the positioning of Left Forum, I think, very little is more reveals how capitalism can't deal with this kind of crisis than the climate change problem, the eco problem. It's like a couple of years ago, there was a few, maybe even around 2008, the media was filled with apocalyptic messages about climate change. And I think when they really looked at the problem, they realized that you can't deal with climate change and maintain the current way things are owned and the way business is done and the way politics is done. And the elites decided, well, we ain't going there. We're not going to make such fundamental changes if that's what it takes. But you think that kind of question would be ripe for the Left Forum?
Well, you and I agree on this, then. I think that's exactly right. I think I don't think there is any better argument against capitalism than the ecological crisis and the fact that it's getting worse, not better, and all measures that they have tried to put forward as solutions, whether it's a simpler life, just opting for a simpler life, or green taxes, green jobs, etc., just have not succeeded, and it's just getting worse. I think that is the most powerful argument against capitalism. Certainly the form of capitalism that we have, some would say we can have a greener capitalism. I'm very skeptical about that. I think at the Left Forum there will be people who think that we can do something within capitalism, but many, many others who think that we cannot, that the crisis indicates yet again that we need to move to a system which is not based on accumulation, and profit.
Some people, I expect, make the argument that for ordinary working people who are losing their jobs and losing their houses and their kids can't go to college, or if they are, they're burdened by terrible debt, will argue that climate change, and this seems a little abstract compared to all of that, because Americans don't seem to be getting hit with it so much, although some of the weather disturbances and floods and things certainly could be connected to it.
I think you're right. I think you're right that people are struggling, and it doesn't affect their immediate life so much, but increasingly it does. I mean, in the United States, in other parts of the world, they've already been, they're ecological refugees, millions of ecological refugees. But now there are droughts not only in North Africa, but in the Midwest. There was a headline just the other day in the Times. The rising sea levels threaten New York City. In Hurricane Sandy showed it. I saw the Hudson River rise and, come over the banks, and go back, a couple of blocks. That's pretty striking. Pace University, where we're meeting, wasn't, it was affected. We weren't able to meet in the spring as we usually do. That's why we're meeting in June. So it's starting to get to us too. There are people who are still homeless because of Hurricane Sandy. So I think that when Katrina happened, people didn't want to say that increased number of hurricanes could be caused by global warming. Now, it's harder to deny. I mean, people who don't think that the forest fires raging in Colorado have anything to do with global warming, they're pretty marginal, I would hope, certainly from any scientific viewpoint.
Now, I know the Left Forum's grappled with this question for many years, and of course, lots of people have grappled with it for many years, but the question is even if one says climate change might have felt abstract to people, and maybe it's less so now, and questions like unemployment and such are more directly affecting people, the fact is the left is not having great success mobilizing people on those issues either. Issues of bread and butter issues at a time when there's the greatest crisis since the 1930s, and chronic unemployment, ridiculous levels of student debt. Like I was saying the other day to someone, how is there not some kind of a bigger movement? I know there is some, but why isn't it bigger? Students rejecting the levels of debt. You have Quebec, where tuitions are way lower than they are in most of the United States. The Quebec students have far, far less debt, and yet hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, and they actually won a political victory. You don't see it here. Like, what is holding people back here?
I think that neoliberalism, ideologically and practically, economically, has so devastated people's consciousness and their organizations, unions, community groups, that people feel and it's to a certain extent true, that collective decisions, collective solutions are not available. We don't have the power. Unions have been really, really anemic, most of them, in responding to the crisis. I mean, a few unions here and there responded positively to Occupy and got the idea that they could be more militant, but for the most part they did not. So people feel powerless, and to a large extent they are, and there isn't the culture, the collective, more collectivist culture, more communal, solidaristic culture in the United States that there is in other parts of the world. It's individualism, I should solve this myself, it's my fault. So, I mean, I think that, I wouldn't write us all off yet, but I think that the United States is harder, just much harder for objective reasons and cultural, psychological reasons. But I think that if you look at history, I think that the labor movement or the civil rights movement, any significant movement in social change that did occur in the United States was a process. You know, there were attempts and failures, and then other attempts and failures, and, you know, then people gradually got more conscious, and so that's all. That's what I'm hoping for here. I think the Occupy movement was very, very significant. I mean, if you look at polls like the Rasmussen poll, you know, a country like the United States, where socialism is supposed to be a bad word, and most people have always in the United States been trained to think that, still, it was surprising the numbers of people who were sympathetic to the idea of socialism. Capitalism is back on the agenda, and once you start really focusing on capitalism and capitalism's failure in the richest country in the world, in the history of the world, to satisfy most people's needs, and more and more people are realizing the implications of our way of life for their children and grandchildren's way of life, that is the ecological damage that is coming. I think capitalism will be more and more the center of attention. I think that's very important.
Okay, thanks for joining us. The Left Forum's on from June 7th to 9th, and tell us the website.
www.leftforum.org.
Okay, if you want
And
more.
Noam Chomsky speaking on Saturday.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us, Nancy.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.